You ever notice how some people look completely fine on the outside, but inside they're running a background process that never shuts down? They're scanning, analyzing, predicting, preparing for threats that haven't even shown up yet. Most people think this is just overthinking, but it's not. It's something neuroscience is starting to call a trauma alert mind, a brain wired early on to stay ready, to stay aware, to never fully relax. And if you're watching this right now, there's a good chance your mind works exactly like that, which means you're paying a daily mental bill most people don't even know exists. Today, we're walking through 12 hidden costs of living with a brain that was trained to survive before it was trained to rest. Not the usual self help list. These are real silent burdens your nervous system carries every single day. Cost 1: the hypervigilance tax. You walk into a coffee shop. Within seconds, your brain has already mapped the room: who's sitting where, who looked up when you entered, the person by the window whose body language shifted slightly, the couple at the back table whose tone just changed. You didn't choose to notice, you just did. That's hypervigilance. And most people think it's awareness. But awareness is something you turn on when you need it. Hypervigilance is something that's always running in the background, draining your battery even when there's no actual threat. Neuroscience research shows that when your nervous system was shaped in an unpredictable environment, your amygdala, the part of your brain responsible for detecting danger, becomes overactive. It doesn't just respond to real threats, it treats uncertainty itself as danger. So now, years later, even when you're safe, your brain is still working overtime, scanning faces, reading tones, looking for micro signals that something's wrong. And here's the cost nobody talks about: you can't just decide to stop, because your brain doesn't see this as optional, it sees it as survival. Which means the mental energy you're using just to get through an ordinary day is something most people only use during an actual crisis. That's the hypervigilance tax. You're paying the cost of high alert even when the danger is long gone. Cost 2: the sleep sabotage. You're lying in bed, physically exhausted, eyes closed, body ready. But your mind has other plans. It decides this is the perfect time to replay that conversation from 3 days ago, to analyze the tone someone used in a text message, to run through every possible version of tomorrow and find the ways it could go wrong. This isn't insomnia. It's your nervous system refusing to power down because powering down feels dangerous. Research on trauma alert brains shows something fascinating. When your brain was conditioned early on to associate silence and stillness with vulnerability, it learns to treat rest as risky. Sleep becomes the time when your guard is down, so your mind fights it. Psychologists call this hyperarousal. Your baseline state of alertness is higher than it should be, which means even when you're trying to sleep, your brain is still watching, still scanning, still preparing. And the cost shows up slowly. It's not dramatic, it's the kind of tired that doesn't go away with a nap. The kind where you wake up and already feel behind, where rest never actually restores you because your brain never fully rested. You're not broken. You're just living with a system that was built to stay awake when staying awake kept you safe. And now, that same system is keeping you awake even when safety isn't the issue anymore. That's the sleep sabotage. Your brain trading rest for readiness every single night. Cost 3: the relationship penalty. Someone you care about says, I'm fine, but their tone was slightly off. Their response came a second too late. Their body language doesn't match their words. And now you can't let it go because your brain has been trained to detect patterns, to notice when something doesn't line up, to read the gap between what people say and what they mean. Most people take I'm fine at face value. You can't. Because your mind has spent years learning that what people say and what's actually happening are often two completely different things. So you start analyzing, you replay the conversation, you search for clues, you wonder if you did something wrong. And the other person has no idea any of this is happening because to them, the conversation ended 5 minutes ago. This is what psychology research calls hypermentalizing. It's when your brain doesn't just pick up on social cues. it overprocesses them. You're reading so deeply into people's behavior that you're seeing meanings and motives that might not even be there. And here's where the cost shows up. It's hard to trust people when you're always analyzing them. It's hard to relax in a relationship when your mind is constantly scanning for signs that something's wrong. You're not paranoid. You're just operating with a nervous system that learned early on that people aren't always safe, even when they seem fine. And now that same system is making it hard to believe anyone when they say they're okay. That's the relationship penalty. The thing that makes you perceptive also makes it nearly impossible to stop reading between the lines. Cost 4, the decision paralysis. You're trying to make a simple decision: where to eat, what to watch, whether to say yes to an invitation. Most people just pick. You can't, because your brain immediately starts running simulations. If I choose this, then this could happen. But if that happens, then I'll need to handle this. And what if this person reacts this way? And what if I regret it later? What should be a 2-second decision turns into a mental marathon. And the worst part is, you're not even aware you're doing it half the time. It just feels normal to you. Cognitive research shows that trauma alert minds develop what's called an intolerance for uncertainty. Your brain was trained in an environment where unpredictability was dangerous. So now even small decisions feel like they carry weight because your mind treats uncertainty as a threat. And here's the hidden cost. While you're stuck running through scenarios, life keeps moving, opportunities pass, moments slip by, and you're left with the exhausting realization that you spent more energy deciding than you would have spent just doing. You don't lack intelligence. You have too much of it running in the wrong direction. Your brain is so good at seeing consequences that it can't stop seeing them, even when the decision doesn't actually matter. That's decision paralysis. The cost of a mind that can't choose without first calculating every possible outcome. Pattern interrupt. Here's what most people miss about all of this. These aren't personality flaws. They're not signs that you're broken or weak or doing life wrong. They're biological adaptations. Your brain built these responses because at some point they kept you safe. The hypervigilance made sense when the environment was unpredictable. The sleep resistance made sense when letting your guard down was dangerous. The relationship scanning made sense when people weren't emotionally reliable. But here's the problem: those adaptations don't know the threat is gone. They're still running the same program even though the environment has changed. So the real cost isn't that your brain works this way. The real cost is that it keeps working this way even when you don't need it to anymore. Let's keep going because the next few costs hit even deeper. Cost 5, the emotional flatline. Something good happens: a promotion, a compliment, a moment that should feel meaningful, and you feel nothing. Not sadness, not joy, just a quiet, flat acknowledgement that something happened. Then, 2 weeks later, you're in the middle of the grocery store and suddenly you're overwhelmed by an emotion you can't even name. It hits you out of nowhere and you don't even know why. This is emotional dysregulation, and it's one of the most confusing costs of a trauma alert mind. Psychologists describe this as a disconnection between your thinking brain and your feeling brain. When emotions weren't safe to express early on, or when they were ignored or punished, your brain learned to suppress them, not by choice, by survival. So now, as an adult, your emotions don't show up when they're supposed to. They show up late, or not at all, or all at once, in moments that make no sense. And here's the cost: you're watching your own life from a slight distance. You know intellectually that something matters, but you can't access the feeling of it mattering. So achievements feel hollow, relationships feel muted. And you start wondering if something is fundamentally wrong with you. You're not emotionally dead, you're just living with a system that learned to delay, suppress, or redirect emotions as a way of staying functional. And now that system is running even when you're safe enough to feel. That's the emotional flatline, the cost of a brain that protects you from feeling too much by making you feel too little. Cost 6, the social battery drain. You go to a dinner, a work event, a casual hangout with friends. And within an hour, you're exhausted. Not physically, mentally. like someone just drained your battery down to 10%. Everyone else seems fine, energized even, but you're running on fumes, counting the minutes until you can leave without seeming rude. This is what researchers call social hyperprocessing. Your brain isn't just participating in the conversation, it's also tracking tone, reading body language, predicting reactions, monitoring group dynamics, and making constant micro adjustments to keep everything smooth. Most people's brains do some of this. Yours does all of it, all the time, without you even realizing it. And here's the cost. What feels like a normal interaction to everyone else feels like work to you. You're not just present, you're managing, and that management takes energy most people don't even know they're supposed to be using. So by the time you get home, you're not just tired, you're depleted. And the idea of doing it again tomorrow feels impossible. You're not antisocial, you're just operating with a nervous system that treats every social interaction like a performance that has to be monitored in real time. And that performance, no matter how well it goes, costs you more than it costs anyone else in the room. That's the social battery drain. The price of being so aware of everyone around you that being around people becomes work. Cost 7, the achievement numbness. You work towards something for months, a goal, a milestone, a win, and when it finally happens, you feel fine, not excited, not proud, just done. There's no celebration, no satisfaction, just a mental check mark and an immediate thought. What's next? This is called reward prediction error, and it's one of the quietest costs of high intelligence shaped by survival. Neuroscience research, particularly Wolfram Schultz's work on dopamine, shows that your brain releases the pleasure chemical dopamine when something unexpected happens. But if your brain already predicted the outcome, the reward is significantly reduced. And here's the problem. Trauma alert minds are exceptionally good at predicting. You've spent years learning to stay ahead of outcomes, to prepare for what's coming, to see the path before you walk it. So by the time you achieve something, your brain already knew it was going to happen. There's no surprise, no reward spike, just confirmation. And the cost is brutal. You stop enjoying your own success. Wins feel hollow. Achievements feel like obligations you completed rather than victories you earned. You're not incapable of joy, you're just living with a brain that has optimized for prediction at the expense of celebration. And now, the very thing that helped you survive, staying ahead, is the thing preventing you from ever fully arriving. That's achievement numbness, the cost of a mind so good at seeing what's coming that nothing ever feels new. Cost 8, the rest guilt. You finally have a free afternoon, no plans, no obligations, time to rest. And instead of resting, you feel guilty, like you're wasting time, like you should be doing something productive. Like rest is something you have to earn, not something you're allowed to just take. This is called productivity anxiety, and it's deeply tied to nervous systems that were shaped by instability. When rest wasn't modeled, or when being useful was the only way to feel safe, your brain internalizes a harsh rule. Rest is only okay if everything else is done. And since everything is never done, rest never feels okay. Psychologists call this hyper-responsibility. You feel responsible not just for your own well-being, but for outcomes, for other people's emotions, for making sure nothing falls apart. And rest feels like dropping the ball. So even when you're sitting still, your mind is running a background audit. What did I forget? What should I be doing? What's going to go wrong if I'm not paying attention? And here's the cost. You never actually recover because recovery requires your nervous system to believe that it's safe to stop. And yours doesn't believe that. It believes stopping is dangerous. You're not lazy. You're not broken. You're just carrying a belief system that says your value is tied to your output. And rest is a risk you can't afford to take. That's rest guilt. The cost of a brain that treats stillness like a threat instead of a necessity. Pattern interrupt. If you're recognizing yourself in most of these, I want to pause for a second because the instinct right now might be to think, great, so I'm just stuck like this. But that's not what this is about. These costs are real. They're not in your head. They're biological, neurological, shaped by experience. But here's the part that matters. Once you understand what you're actually dealing with, You stop blaming yourself for it. You stop thinking you're broken. You stop wondering why simple things feel so heavy. Because they feel heavy, because your brain is doing more work than most people's brains do just to get through an ordinary day. That's not weakness, that's load. And load can be managed once you see it clearly. Let's finish this. The last four costs are the ones people almost never talk about. Cost 9, the future anxiety loop. You're not anxious about what's happening. You're anxious about what could happen. Your brain runs simulations constantly. What if this goes wrong? What if that person reacts badly? What if I make the wrong choice and everything falls apart? And the worst part? You're not just thinking about it, you're feeling it right now, as if it's already real. This is called prospective simulation, and research by Schachter and Addis shows that trauma alert minds are exceptionally good at mentally time traveling into the future. But here's the cost. Your brain doesn't just simulate the future, it experiences it emotionally in the present. So you're grieving losses that haven't happened, stressing over problems that don't exist yet, living through worst case scenarios on repeat. And by the time the actual future arrives, you're already exhausted from the version you lived in your head. You're not being irrational. Your brain is doing exactly what it was trained to do: prepare for danger by imagining every possible version of it. But now, that preparation has become its own form of suffering. That's the future anxiety loop, the cost of a mind that tries to survive tomorrow by living it today. Cost 10, the memory overload. You remember things most people forget. The exact words someone used in an argument 5 years ago, the look on their face, the way the room felt. And it's not just the facts you remember, it's the feeling, the hurt, the embarrassment, the fear, all of it stored in HD, replaying whenever something in the present triggers the memory. Neuroscience research shows that the hippocampus, your brain's memory center, doesn't just store events, it stores emotional context. And when your brain experienced heightened emotional activation early on, those memories get encoded with more sensory detail. So while other people's bad memories fade, yours stay sharp, vivid, present. And here's the cost: you're carrying emotional experiences from years ago as if they happened yesterday. You can't just let it go because your brain didn't file it away. It kept it active. You're not holding grudges. You're not being dramatic. You're just living with a memory system that was built to remember threats so you could avoid them in the future. And now that system is making it impossible to forget the things you wish you could. That's memory overload. The cost of a brain that remembers everything, including the things that hurt. Cost 11, the meaning exhaust. You can't do anything casually. Everything has to mean something. A job isn't just a job, it has to align with your purpose. A relationship isn't just companionship, it has to be deeply meaningful. Even small decisions carry weight because you need them to matter. And when they don't, when something feels shallow or surface level, you disengage completely. This is what psychologists studying post traumatic growth call existential hypersensitivity. When you've been through hardship, your brain doesn't just survive it, it searches for meaning in it. And that search becomes a filter for everything. You can't just exist. You need your existence to be justified by depth, purpose, significance. And here's the cost: most of life is ordinary, most moments are not profound. And when your brain requires meaning to stay engaged, ordinary life starts to feel empty. So you either exhaust yourself searching for depth in everything, or you drift through life feeling disconnected from it. You're not being difficult, you're just carrying a psychological framework that treats meaning as a survival need, not a luxury. And now that framework is making it hard to be present in moments that don't feel important enough. That's meaning exhaustion, the cost of a mind that can't rest unless it knows why it's resting. Cost 12, the silent loneliness. You're surrounded by people who care about you: friends, family, maybe a partner. And yet, you feel completely alone. Not because they don't try, but because the part of you that's carrying all of this, the hypervigilance, the exhaustion, the emotional dysregulation, the future anxiety, feels impossible to explain. So you don't. You smile, you show up, you function, and inside you're carrying a weight nobody else can see. This is called invisible burden, and it's one of the deepest costs of living with a trauma alert mind. Research on social support shows that people are willing to help, but only if they understand what's wrong. And when what's wrong is invisible, when it's a nervous system running on overdrive, when it's a brain that never stops scanning, it becomes almost impossible to communicate. So you stop trying, you handle it alone. And the loneliness isn't from lack of people, it's from the quiet certainty that even if you explained it, they wouldn't fully get it. And here's the cost: you become incredibly self reliant. But that self reliance isn't freedom, it's isolation dressed up as strength. You're not being distant, you're just tired of explaining a reality most people have never lived. And so you carry it quietly, knowing that the people who love you can't help with something they can't see. That's silent loneliness. The cost of living with a mind that operates at a frequency most people don't even know exists. Every single one of these costs is real, and none of them mean you're broken. They're not flaws, they're not things you did wrong. They're adaptations your brain built to survive an environment that required you to be more aware, more prepared, more responsible than a child should ever have to be. But those adaptations are still running, even though the environment changed, even though you're safe now, even though the threat is gone. And that's the bill. The daily mental cost of carrying a system built for survival into a life that's asking you to rest. You don't need to fix the way your brain works, but you do need to see the load it's carrying. Because once you see it, you stop wondering why everything feels so heavy. It feels heavy because you're doing more than most people do just to get through an ordinary day. And that's not weakness. That's the hidden cost of being built to survive before you were ever allowed to just live. See you in the next one.